Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is filmmaker Renuka Jeyapalan, whose directorial credits include episodes of Workin' Moms, Kim's Convenience, Ginny and Georgia, Sort of, Son of a Critch, and Children Ruin Everything, and a segment of the 2017 drama Ordinary Days, which you really should check out sometime. Her first solo feature, Stay the Night, stars Andrea Bang and Joe Scarpolino as two young people spending a potentially life-changing evening wandering around Toronto together. It just screened here at the Real Asian Film Festival, and it opens commercially in Toronto and Vancouver this Friday, November 18th. Renuka picked The Verdict, Sidney Lumet's 1982 drama, adapted from Barry Reed's novel by hot young playwright David Mamet, starring Paul Newman as Frank Galvin, an alcoholic Boston lawyer who finds himself unable to settle a simple medical malpractice case against a Catholic hospital, instead deciding to take the entire Archdiocese of Boston to court in a desperate swing for public justice. Or maybe it's something else. Either way, it offered Newman the opportunity to challenge his own persona against actors as powerful as Charlotte Rampling, Jack Warden, Milo O'Shea, and James Mason. The result was one of the best films of his career. And it's not just me saying that. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I've always loved this movie, and I think I picked it because for me, it's a perfect film. It's three filmmakers working at the top level of their craft. So, the writer, screenwriter David Mamet, director Sidney Lumet, and obviously Paul Newman. And I think the script is classic Hollywood structure, but done so well, like just perfect. But and then the direction, and then the acting, and then all of the departments and keys just added to it. And I think it's like 1981, almost 41 years, I guess. But I feel like it holds up. I feel like movies like this aren't made anymore. And it also has that. I get sucked into it every time. Like it's a David and Goliath story. This lawyer, alcoholic, has been this sort of courtroom drama, but it really is this redemption story, this personal story, which I always connect to. It's also like I aspire to make this kind of movie. Like that's the kind of movie. This is the kind of movie I'd love to make one day in my career.
It is so unique in its sort of standing, because I was reading the reviews at the time, and I just rewatched it last night. Hadn't seen it in about, 20 years or so, I would guess. And I had just been having a conversation with somebody about Sidney Lumet and specifically Dog Day Afternoon, and how it's a film that cares so much about every character.
Yes.
And the other thing about Dog Day Afternoon to me is the New Yorkness of it all, where it is the most quintessentially New York film where everybody in it just wants to be getting on with their day and has no time for any of the stuff that's happening. And so, that's 1975, and it's based on a true story, and it's got all this electricity. And then he makes Network, which is another film of the moment in its way, but maybe tries a little too hard to be stylistic instead. And this felt like this is what he does. This is what Lumet does, except that he doesn't sympathize with everybody in this one. There's a very clear line between the people we care for and the people who are in their way.
Yeah. And he's such a, I guess, cliche actor's director. Like performances across all of his films are just amazing. And I love him as a director because he's not flashy. And maybe when in some of those films, like his last film, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, I felt like is this a Sidney Lumet movie? Like it was so like flashy and weird, like lighting, cuts and editing. But this one is just classic, elegant style. His blocking is amazing. His masters hold a full scene and feel robust enough, and you don't even realize that they're masters, or that they're just one take or one shot. But yeah, Sidney Lumet, like he's one of my all-time favorite directors that I would love. I love his directing style because it forefronts your characters, the story, the acting. And as a director, you're there, but you're not in the way. Yeah,
he is never present, like in an annoying way. I think Mamet is probably more present as a screenwriter, just because some of his stuff is so signature.
Yeah.
Even then, this was his third feature script that he'd written.
Or third. And the history of this movie is that Mamet adapted the book, and then it was with another director, and then another very big actor. I think it was Redford, actually.
It was, yeah. Redford, and originally it was Arthur Hiller, who was
Yes.
sort of the less interesting Lumet. Like, he was a good technician and made a lot of the movies that people think Sidney Lumet made
Right.
in the 60s and 70s, but they're not his. And then for a little while, this I find absolutely fascinating, Redford took it to Sidney Pollack without telling the producers,
Yes.
who were, like Zanuck and Brown, the guys that made Jaws.
Yeah, and I think Redford was working it and didn't, because the character that Frank Galvin, which Newman plays, is an alcoholic. He's messy. He's has been through the ringer. He's not attractive in the beginning. He's not. I think Redford wanted to take out all that stuff and make him this sort of glory, like
a young crusader.
Yeah, this crusader, this cause. But what I love about like Newman is, and I think the history is that, and then I guess that didn't work out with Redford and Sidney Pollack, and then Sidney Lumet came in and like I read all, and they had like other writers come in, and then Sidney Lumet took found like, what's the first draft? It was like David Mamet. Now let's make this.
Yeah.
And then Newman I think quickly attached to it, but Newman's just like, love it. Everything. He looks, I don't know, I can't remember what the movie was before he did this, but he looks older in this movie. I guess he came back and the hair is a bit longer, a bit whiter, a bit more gray. He looks older. It's such a, I always think of like, what actor, 20 years from now, what actor can I put an actor in like this role that was sort of like a Newman-esque person and bring them back and like put them in a role like The Verdict. Yeah, it's just for me a perfect movie.
Yeah, it was a real turning point for Newman, who had just, I think the one before this was Absence of Malice, which nobody really remembers terribly well. He plays a guy who gets smeared by a journalist.
Oh, okay.
I think, if I remember correctly, Sally Field is an overambitious journalist, and she puts him in the forefront of a story about dirty business, and he sues to get, basically he does everything he can to get his reputation back. That's been forever since I've seen it. This is Paul Newman realizing he's getting old and having to steer into it, I think, in a really interesting way. And he's got just the right self-awareness to show us a little bit of the Paul Newman thing, to show us how Frank's been coasting, right? Like, this is how he hasn't gone under. He's just charming enough that people are happy to see him, even though he's a useless, messy drunk.
Yes.
He can still hit on women because it's 1982, and that was a thing. But the world he navigates is still sort of tolerating him because he's really, because he's secretly Paul Newman.
He was a golden boy, and there is something. It's his history as an actor, as a very good looking person, kind of all lends itself to this movie at that time in his life, and the audience. I mean, as I'm watching it, I instantly connect to him. Even at his worst, when he's like, at the beginning, first couple of scenes, he's going to funerals and like giving his card to the widow, like ambulance chasing for like cases. He's got no cases, and really pathetic. And I think and then like his friend Mickey, or like former boss or lawyer, co-lawyer, like drags him, like he's passed out in his office, a drunken night, and Mickey like just drags him by the collar around the room to the couch, and it's just like everything is just so down and a loser. But it's Paul Newman, so you can't, he's not really a loser, but it just still feels real. It still feels authentic, and it was great casting.
Yeah, and Jack Warden as Mickey, I think he's his former teacher. There's a reference in the dialogue somewhere to how like you had a great teacher. So either he was a law professor and then became this guy's.
I thought they worked. I thought they were both like in the firm together. That Mickey retired or something. Is that not it? Something like that.
Yeah, maybe it's implied that they've had a business relationship a number of times, but I still don't fully know what that club is that Frank goes and gets Mickey out of. It's just some shady room. Yeah,
it's like old lawyers and I don't know, who knows, but Jack Warden is doing the best what he does, which is that sidekick, telling the truth. This is how it is. But and just about the other roles in the movie, like you said, everyone has every role in this movie, I think, has something, like has an actor, a character actor, shines. Even the plaintiff who's comatose in a bed, and like when the scene where Paul Newman, sort of changes his mind is that we haven't even talked about what the movie is about, so hopefully that's okay. So the movie, the scene, which I think is like the act one turning point, where Paul Newman goes to his client's hospital room, and it's this comatose Deborah Ann Kay, and she's lying there comatose, and pipes and tubes, in her and everything. And he takes a Polaroid as if that's going to be his evidence to make his case for a plea or a, what do you call
settlement,
it? A settlement, yeah. And there's no dialogue until the end of that scene. It is the best scene, and it is the best acting. Paul is doing nothing. He's just taking these Polaroids, and it's all inside, all these wheels turning, and you see that change. And it's like an amazing turning point for a film, because you're also like, from up until that moment, everyone's like, the plaintiff wants to, her brother, her sister and her brother-in-law want to settle, who the ones taking the case. He kind of wants to settle because he wants the money.
Yeah, the archdiocese wants to make it go away.
Everyone wants to settle. And then that scene turns, Frank Galvin around, and he realizes, actually, I can't settle. This is the case. I gotta win this case. I'm her lawyer. And this is the case for me. This is the case that's going to turn my life around too.
Yeah. From a screenwriting position too, it's almost poisonous, right? Because there's no dialogue, there's no motivation. We never get a speech about why. It's just there. And Mamet trusts, he trusts the director, who wasn't Lumet at the time, but on the page, like, you have to trust that the filmmakers will get it, and then the actor will carry it. And then Lumet trusts Newman, and Newman just gets, the thing that he does. Watching it again this time around, it was just like, oh, he softens, and then he's horrified. Yeah. And it's not until he hesitates taking that third picture. Yeah. That's the key for me, where his whole body changes, but he never utters a sound. And we don't really get to see the pictures up close, which I think is another really elegant thing that Lumet does.
We see them developing.
We see them, but we don't, there's never a really clear, the camera itself does not get close enough to the pictures. Yes. They still sort of abstract, and we never really see Deborah's face.
Yeah. I was trying to think of that scene. I think it works because it's just classic screenplay structure in that scene as well. There's a beginning, middle, and end. He's coming in. He's like, okay, I'm going to take this picture. Like, great, got this picture. This is going to prove my settlement. Give me, prove it right. And we're going to clear this off the table. And then the second picture, and it's like, okay, there's something a little bit off. And then it's like you said, that third picture, another turning point. And then he sits down on the bed, and then these nurses kind of are talking and coming, like, he can't be in there, literally, you can't be in there, this is going to work. And he says, the only line that he says in the scene is like, I'm her attorney. I think that's what he says. And the way he says it is perfection, because for me, it's like, he doesn't feel worthy. He is her attorney, but he doesn't feel worthy of it. And it's kind of like, I gotta earn this and earn myself. And but then I think the next scene is him at the archdiocese with the bishop going over. They're giving him the settlement, and he's noticed, and then all of the reasoning why he's decided to take the case comes in there. But it's a beautiful scene. It's just, you're right. They each had to trust each other, trust the script. Who knows that a studio note or a network note would be like, hey, we need to know why he's changing his mind. This is like the turning point. And but I feel like everything before that scene fuels that decision in such a beautiful way. The stakes are so high, and then you're like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen if he doesn't try this case? It's like, all is lost. That is the worst thing.
Yeah. And it's just a single human life too, right? It's not one of those giant, it's implied that this will happen again, that the hospital is set up in order to protect the doctors who've made this mistake and maybe made it again or will make it again, have made it before, all of that. And it's on that level, it's about institutional responsibility, but there's never a speech about that either. There's no speech about how punitive damages work to prevent this from happening again. And I've seen that speech 100 times.
And I love that there's no speech like that, because I love that this is personal. And I don't know, I think maybe nowadays you want that big speech, like Spotlight had that big speech that Mark Ruffalo makes in it, and like, but this is just these small kind of moves, and it's all internal. Like you see it. The big speech comes at the end of the movie when he's doing his summation, his final closing remarks. And we could talk about that too later, but
sure.
That's probably the biggest speech. And then, but that's also the all is lost. Like we've lost this case. I'm just going to say what I feel and give it. That's it. I'm not going to try to win anymore. This is the truth. And, but yeah, I think that's what I connect to this movie. It's personal for him, and the movie forefronts that over the case, but in a fine way, not in a bad way, and giving equal weight. But we kind of really don't really know who the defendants are, who those doctors are. There's two of them, but you only see one.
Yeah, we only ever see one.
Vague, we really get to know Frank and his story, and along for the ride, for sure.
Yeah. And Frank's story is also complicated by the relationship he starts to form with Laura, the woman played by Charlotte Rampling, which simultaneously is like David Mamet's worst instincts as a writer, and also Charlotte Rampling being amazing. And so I'm constantly conflicted every time I see that.
Why you don't like her character in terms of how she's sort of sleeping with, she like sleeps with Frank to get information, and then that kind of angle.
The honey trap thing. Well, I mean, I don't doubt that was fairly popular in the 70s and 80s, I'm sure it's still done now in law firms, God help us, and places like consultancies.
Yeah.
But my problem with it is that Rampling is so strong an actor and so powerful a presence, especially opposite Newman. I mean, they are both remarkable physical specimens.
Yes.
Right? Like just looking at them is interesting. And like her cheekbones can cut his face off.
Yeah.
And that plus the age difference and the Boston aspect of it all, she is so too good for him. Like she is the only reason, like it's a tell that she has an ulterior motive.
She's so good for him because I mean, she's quite flawed as well. I mean, she's also an alcoholic. She's also,
no, she's too good. She's so too good for him. She's so obviously outclassing him on every level. She's so much better put together as a character.
As a character.
The one thing that's missing from the film, to my mind, is a speech where she explains how she ended up with him at all. Because that one moment towards the end where she says, I can't invest in losers.
Yeah.
That's real, I think. She started to fall for him and develop a real relationship. But he is too sozzled to land her more than one night, the way the film sets him up. Like there's a way to parallel Frank's reawakening to life itself with the possibility of experiencing a real relationship with this person. But she's so underwritten that like Rampling is so good at playing the coldness behind Laura, the calculation. And in retrospect, you see it right off. That's the thing that's missing, that the character doesn't exist and she is doing everything she can to build one.
This is true. And she does an amazing job. Like from the moment you see her in that bar on her own, you're like, who is that? Like, I mean, I think she's got this red scarf. Like she's the only thing that sort of stands out with color in that scene.
Yeah.
And he goes right to her like a moth to a flame. But I'm okay with her being that kind of character. And because it's kind of like, oh, this is sort of the love interest. And then when there is that twist, you want to call it a twist, that she's really been a mole and feeding information from Frank's side to the defendants, it's like, wow, like, oh, okay, this all kind of fits. And then if you rewatch the movie and to watch her performance, amazing. Because all of those moments where you can see that she's maybe, she was maybe acting at first like just shy and just being cold, but like she was kind of fishing for information a little bit, and it's really, really great.
Yeah, she's terrific. That I think the problem is that Mamet, as a writer, and maybe this is more me being a retrospective critic than anything else, he's just not interested in women in this film. Like,
no. Although there are a lot of women in the movie. There's there's the Deborah N.K., the woman in the coma. There's her sister, which I think Roxanne Hart plays her.
Yes.
And she's great. she's this sister who just wants to move on, but is so torn. And maybe all of those, and then, there's Charlotte Rampling, Laura, and then there's
the two nurses.
The two nurses, like, so Lindsay Krause is the but I think maybe all the sensitivity and all of the dimension, not all, but maybe more, was added by Sidney Lumet and found in that. And so that was a nice kind of pairing with Mamet gives the structure and the bolts and the nuts and everything to do that. And then Sidney Lumet really kind of carves out some really great performances.
Yeah. Well, he gives people, I'm thinking of Rooney, Maureen Rooney, who's played by Julia Bavasso, the attending nurse, who's just angry, just furious, and has nothing but rage, but is given the humanity behind it because she's hurt.
Yeah. Like she only has two scenes.
Two scenes, yeah.
And like the one scene, that first one, I was watching it and she's like, you could tell, like, her direction was like, you're just shutting him down, you're closed. They're literally, they're in a door. In the door frame, they're talking between a door, talking to each other, and you just close. And then the end of the scene, she closes the door on him. But the next scene, they're in a chapel,
in
the hospital
chapel,
and she's vulnerable. Like, it's just beautiful pairing of scene and locations. And she's vulnerable, she's open, she's unprepared, and you get a character from those two opposite kind of interpretator, scenes. So.
Yeah, well, and the way Galvin reaches out to her too, literally grabbing her arm, but not in a hostile way, just, on almost, I need your help sort of moment, and gives her the space to talk, as opposed to pushing himself in front of her the way he did in the first scene. It's even that just sort of tracks on the scale of his own evolution and development as a better person. And
I think it's like, that's why I love Sidney Lumet. It's the direction, the approach is so subtle. These aren't things that are in your face. Look at this. And it's craft. It's really a high level of craft, and it's confidence in your storytelling, and it's not getting in the way. And
well, and understanding what each actor brings too, because the other thing that I kept thinking about this time through was Newman has to calibrate to I've never seen another actor who is better at understanding what the audience will take away from what he's doing. He has this incredible ability to play to the camera, even when he's not even facing it. He has a way of showing us. And he never got enough credit for being the kind of actor that he was. Even, early on, he came out of the Actors Studio, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And when you go back and look at all of his work, like Cool Hand Luke, where he's just engaging with the camera, HUD, where he's not, like he's turning off the charisma to direct it elsewhere. And here, this is a performance where he's keeping it all together, like by a fraying thread. We understand that there's that great little visual bit where his hand is shaking too much to pick up the shot.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie has that level of wobbliness to him. Like, he finds a way to do it in his eyes without doing it in his body. He never plays drunk, which is incredible.
Yes. No, I think the thing is, when you play drunk, you're trying to play sober. That's sort of the method. And he's just so good. I mean, even like the opening of the movie, which I'm sure they stole from later footage, but it's the credits, and it's just him at that pinball machine in the bar. And we're just a slow dolly in on him while the credits in bright red are there. And we hear the ping and the pong of the machine, of the game, and yet he's just, what is he thinking? I'm like, what is he thinking? And we're like going closer to him, and that's the movie. So he doesn't need to do much. And I think I heard, I watched on YouTube or whatever, a video of him, some promotional footage of them making the movie or whatever, and they interviewed him, and he was like, this movie is, I'm not doing anything, I'm just being. I think it was probably very, not in a hard, it's not a bad thing to say, but easy. He had all of these, it's like a culmination of all of his experience in life and bringing it to the table. And it was, I think it sounded like from that interview, had a really great time on the movie, working it. And you can tell, he's not in the way of that, but you just, I, as a viewer, I'm just enjoying it, all of his performances.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the latest Shiny Things newsletter, my twice-weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming thing. Last week, I wrote about the 4K and Blu-ray releases of Top Gun Maverick and Jordan Peele's Nope, as well as Sony's latest Columbia Classics 4K set, which, whew. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Twitter account. Did you miss me writing about movies? I did. Come check it out.
They never worked together again, though. They never worked together, did they?
I don't think so. I think this was their one, because he started making fewer films after.
Yeah, we did The Color of Money. Like, that was the one he won the Oscar for.
Right. Oh, and we can talk about the unfairness of the whole Oscar thing. I mean,
I know, yes.
As much as I enjoy Ben Kingsley in Gandhi, and he is, it's a good performance. This is a great one.
This is a great one. This is a career making. And I think Paul Newman, I mean, I love the Oscars. You know, I had a time obsessed with the Oscars. But Paul Newman, I think, when I've seen footage of, like, he was there for the verdict at the Oscars. But then when The Color of Money came and he was nominated, he didn't show up. He's like, fuck this. I'm not going to win. They're never going to give me this Oscar and whatever. So he didn't show up. And then he won for The Color of Money.
Yeah. And it's one of those weird things, too, where even there, the argument was that he was his makeup win, because it was obviously for the verdict. Yeah. His makeup win deprived James Woods of an Oscar for Salvador, which I would maybe argue with now. But subsequently, James Woods has demonstrated that he's not, I don't deserving of much. So I think we can let that slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I'm just double checking here. He did not, as far as I can tell. Yeah, they never worked together again. I was going to say, though, the thing that I never would have understood, and this is my own little story. I met Paul Newman. I interviewed him on the junket in '94 for Nobody's Fool. And he is, I mean, I've met a lot of famous people over the years. It's just the job.
Yeah.
He is maybe the single most charismatic human being I ever met in my entire life.
So is he just so comfortable in his skin? Like, he's just, like, so grounded and, like, casual with everyone and, like, just himself? Is that
was part of it? But also, and this is for Nobody's Fool, so he's in his 60s. He's, he's not who he used to be. I can't imagine what it would have been like to meet him in, like, 1972.
Yeah.
But it was a junket situation. So we're in the Riga Royale on 54th Street, which is now in New York, which is now the London, I think, on a high floor in one of those big, rooms where they take out all the furniture and they put in a big round table, and there's 10 of us around the table, and they bring in the talent, and then they bring the talent out and we cycle through it. So Melanie Griffith was part of it, and Richard Russo, and Robert Benton. And it was a really good junket, full stop. And there was this little lull, because that happens sometimes, like the next person doesn't come out of the last room that fast. So you're all just sort of sitting around. And then it was the most bizarre, animalistic thing, this reaction that I've ever experienced, where you felt the hair on the back of the person's neck next to you go up. And it was all the way down the hall. He had turned the corner and everyone was reacting to him.
Wow.
And then he came in and holy shit. This is what it looks like. This is what it is.
Yeah.
I really can't get my head around watching him act in a crowd scene, just because if he's doing that to 10 people, what must it be like?
Right.
Yeah. How are you supposed to believe this guy can't command a room in a trial?
Yeah, that's
what he does. He can actually turn it off. He could find a way to channel it. Like, we know that's Paul Newman on screen. No one else has eyes like that. No one else has a jaw like that. And even Frank Galvin at his worst is still Paul Newman in there, right? So it's this incredible trick of using his own charisma and his own history against it, which he does again in Nobody's Fool, and even better, I think, because that's someone who's never amounted to anything, as opposed to Galvin, who was someone.
I haven't seen that movie in a long time, Nobody's Fool, but from what I remember, it's quite a playful kind of character as well. He's having fun. Is like Jessica Tandy in it? But I think I remember those scenes. But those would have been fun. I mean, she was older, and, like, there was an interesting dynamic there too. But
he plays a no account. Like, he's somebody who's just this charming failure in a small upstate New York or Pennsylvania town, and he has to he's confronted with the grandson he never knew he had from the son that didn't want to spend much time with him. And it's just about somebody reawakening to life.
Yeah.
And so it's a very comfortable place for him after the verdict, I think. But he is Oh, he's so good in it. I'm so glad I got to meet him on that one and talk about that film, because he said, like, it's pretty much exactly what you said about The Verdict, where he's just existing,
He's just
where
existing.
all
Yeah.
he's doing, I think the way he put it was, all I'm doing is messing with everybody who comes on screen.
Right.
And
Yeah. I
and
think maybe actors, I feel like it's interesting as you watch some actors who've done a lot of stuff, and then as they get into their career, find like, I just need to just be. I don't need to do a lot. In one of my a performance I really was amazed by in recent years was Anthony Hopkins in The Father. You've
mm,
seen that movie, which is, a horror movie basically. But
yeah,
he's and I heard about him talking about that role where it's just like he didn't do much. It's just being, but he's great in that. Heartbreak. My mom had Alzheimer's, and I understand with that perspective, but that he was just heartbreaking in that movie, but just being. And I think as I think as an actor, I'm so privileged. I get to work with actors and direct actors and talk to them and get to know them. And I love just to know who the actor is as a person. And as a director, just trying to get them to be that,
yeah,
or shades of that, or sides of that, or whatever. And it's just when you're just being on screen is when the real stuff really happens.
yeah. It's remarkable to see that unlock, right? To know somebody a little bit and then watch
Mhm.
them tilted into a different direction. Um, when it happens, it is, and I think it always reads like,
Yeah.
either there are actors who aren't taking direction and resist. Sometimes you can tell. And then
Right.
there are people who lean into some part of themselves and find a purity, or like a better version or a worse version of themselves. But I always come back to, again, I've been incredibly fortunate in my career to meet all these legends. Robert Duvall once just casually said the secret to acting is you just have to be you underneath. And it's
Love
so
that.
simple and it sounds preposterous until you see an actor like Newman or Duvall, like, who's done that their entire career, and you look back and you realize these are like these minor variations on notes that they're doing. And the other person I think of, the only other actor I think who could have played Frank Galvin, and it's not Redford, it's Gene Hackman.
Oh yeah, Gene
Like,
Hackman would have been great.
at that point in time, and watching it again last night, I realized the opening scene of Frank trashing his office is the last scene in the conversation.
Oh right, that's
Um,
right. The apartment, yeah.
and it
Yeah,
almost plays, like, it almost picks
yeah.
right up.
That
And
is
I
so
think if it
true.
had been Hackman,
Love
you would
that.
have that association in your mind, and it wouldn't work, because this guy isn't like, that guy was a bugger. He's not a lawyer. That would make no sense.
Yeah.
And Newman has just been the all-American, the everyman, the guy who, stands up and is righteous for everything. That to see him try to take an easy case and just having to be, dragged into doing the right thing
Yeah.
is so jarring for people. I mentioned earlier that I looked up some of the reviews, and I think it was Ebert at the time who said that, this isn't a thriller, it's more of a character study. It's like, yeah, what did you, it was sort of marketed as a thriller, which makes no sense, because that's not what
Yeah,
this
well, like a
is.
courtroom drama, that's what's going to get people in and what's going on. And but I mean, I think the film holds up. Like I love the look of the film, but
Mm.
I think that personal stuff, the redemption story, Newman, that's what stands, and that's I think people would connect to, because like the courtroom drama stuff really gets going in the last 30 minutes of the film, really, where you have people on the stand and everything, and cross examination. But it's yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't, I mean, it's funny because it does, in retrospect, there is a fast pace to it. The whole thing takes place over a couple of months. He's been letting the case sit for a year and a half, and now all of a sudden he's got a court date in 2 weeks, and then it's 5 days, and then his witness goes missing, and we have this weird collapsing of, I just talked to him a week ago.
Yeah,
But because the film is so slow and deliberate and lingers on him just not moving
yeah.
and being broken and miserable and still, I think it feels slower and longer. It feels like this is taking place over a
In
year,
time,
which I
yeah.
think is how it feels to Frank.
Yeah, it's interesting because it does. I think the case does take place over 3 days or something crazy, like or a weekend, like Thursday, Friday, then a weekend, and then the Monday or something like
Mm.
that. But yeah, you're right. There are those just shots of just him trying to like figure out what I should do. But I would also say that every single scene is built on top of the other one, and without one of them, like it doesn't, like it's just perfect structure of a story, and they all kind of help. And there's nowhere to hide as like, and I just made a movie which is like romance where there's no montage, there's no bells and whistles. I really just wanted to. I actually made a rule. Like, I don't want to do a montage. I just want to like tell a linear story and have an audience feel that journey as well. And I feel like this movie does that. It's like every single scene builds on each other, on the one before, and that's hard to do. That is not, it looks simple, it seems simple, but it's hard to do because you have nowhere to hide your story plot holes, your mistakes, your I didn't get this, I didn't, this doesn't make sense in the story. Everything really needs to hold up, and that's what this is. So I think The Verdict, yeah, like I said, it's a perfect movie because of all those Paul Newman directing, and then really it's the screenplay, which yes is a bit flashy because Mamet does have his dialogue, but there's some great lines in the movie too. Like I think James Mason plays the defense lawyer, and there's that I wrote it down. There's a line that Jack Warden, how he describes him, he's like the Prince of fucking Darkness. It's like just like that is such a Mamet kind of line, and then you see James Mason in his like sweater vest and tie, and he's older, and he's with his table full of young lawyers and holding court, and he's great in the movie too. He's like chewing up every scene, and it's a thrill to watch that as well.
Yeah, and the first thing Frank says about him is he's a good man.
Yeah, see, that's right.
And Warden just shoots him down.
Yeah.
Which is great too, because it also because it leaves you wondering, at least left me wondering, does Frank actually believe this? Is that just what he says when he doesn't know somebody? Like it's implied that Kilcannon knows Frank really well, even before the Oppo research. Like they know who he is, and they can count on him to screw up.
Maybe that's like Frank is good. He's like, he sees the good in people. There's that aspect. There's a forlornness about that too. Like, well, I don't know. Yeah, he's good. Like he's just, he doesn't want to say anything bad. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that's in there.
Just because I assume that every line that Mamet writes has meaning. It's layered with meaning. And the ending too. Like we really should just talk about the amazing story about the ending, which is that he didn't want the verdict itself because all that mattered was that Frank was going to be okay. Yeah. And
what do you think? I mean, I like, as I'm watching it, I kind of want that verdict. You want that, but I like how we get the verdict. We don't know what the settlement is. We just know it's going to be bigger than what the original settlement would have been, like a much bigger. And then we have it gets undercut by that last scene with Frank and Laura in their separate rooms, her in hotel, him in his office, and she's calling him with like, the drink on her chest or something, and like she's in a bad place, and he's now doesn't answer that phone call, it just keeps ringing and ringing and ringing, and we cut to black.
Yeah. But I mean, I love that ending.
Yeah, it's a great
it prefigures all the one day at a time speeches you hear about recovering alcoholics. That's like the fact that he doesn't pick up the phone is the thing that tells me Frank's going to be okay, because a lot more money could just mean a lot more booze. And, even Ebert thought he was sipping whiskey out of a coffee cup, but no, the whole point is he's just sitting there alone with cold coffee, because you never see him stop drinking. That's the other genius thing about this. There is no moment where he looks at the thing and puts it down, or like over the course of the movie, he switches from spirits to beer. Yeah. Like there's that moment in the I think it's before he flies out to New York, where he just goes and gets a beer out of the fridge at 6 a.m. Right. And it's that little detail, rather than waking up with a shot, that he's sort of easing himself out of it. And maybe he will still be a social drinker or something, but there's no speech, there's no moment. Yeah, it's a personal choice. It's just internal. I also when I was rewatching, I noticed that when his first meeting with the bishop, the archdiocese, and he's like they're going to give him the checkbook, what the settlement will be. They pour him a little drink. Yeah, it's beautiful. Like they know what his weaknesses are, his vices are. They pour him that little drink, and the alcohol is there. I've never thought to do like what's his alcohol journey, like what drinks is he doing? But you're right. It's very quite real. That's the other thing about the movie. It feels real. It's very, even the lighting is very, I love the lighting. It's like a painting. It's like a Caravaggio painting. It's such a
high contrast between like the light and the shadows and these like jewel tones, like church, like, you know, kind of like stained glass colors sometimes, which all goes, you know, towards all the themes that are going on in the movie.
Yeah, even the fact that his office has a one window thing with an arch behind it, it kind of looks like a cathedral.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just floating there.
I don't know if you noticed this. I also noticed that like the elevators never work in the movie. Like people, there's no, you can't, there's no fast way to go up, fast way to go down. They're always climbing stairs. Like all walk and talks, lots of stairs, which is beautifully done. Like in the hospital, in his office, he's like climbing up the stairs because the elevators doesn't work, which I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like that was, you know, all these exposition-y scenes. They just sort of walk and talk in these staircases and hospitals and hallways, and it looks great, but it also has some symbolism there too.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a city that's being neglected, where nothing is working because nobody cares anymore. Like they've gone past the we need to fix this to the I'll just take the stairs. Like everybody just reflexively is disappointed when something doesn't work, but they're used to it.
Yeah, yeah. And then like so it's set in Boston, and again, the locations, I guess maybe this has to do with him doing such great masters or like wide shots that kind of turn into coverage or turn into like, you know, things, but everyone's in such a great, he positions people in such a great spot in the frame. And there's a real sense of place and great use of location. I think, I mean, I read that it was like shot, you know, exteriors in Boston, obviously, but then interiors were in New York. I don't always love some of the interior sets. Like, you know, his apartment feels like kind of like a set to me. But still run down or whatever. But like the bar is amazing. I think that's a real bar. And
yeah. And when people cross squares and what you like, you feel the bitterness, you feel the cold. I think about something like the Friends of Eddie Coyle, where people are trapped in that environment. There's no way out. And this is the other end of that. There's a window and he has to get through it, but he just has to make it through this. He has to thread this needle professionally, personally, all these challenges. I mean, there is a way to do this on stage, but I don't want to see that. I want to see the world. I want to see it built and existing.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like the one thing, and I was rewatching it, the one thing I was like, I don't know about this part of it is the score. The score is again, I think in the 80s that was like that, you know, strings, classic orchestra kind of score. It is a little didactic, sometimes telling us what we should feel. If I were to make the movie again, this, you know, I would something a little different. I always like the score of The Firm, a Sidney Pollack film.
Right.
There's no piano. It's just piano. But I'm not saying that for this movie, but the score for me just was a bit retro, but it's meant to be invisible too. So that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's either, I think the problem is that the score isn't used continuously.
Yes.
Right. Like when it's gone, it's great. And when it comes in, it just crashes in because it's so big. But yeah, something more minimalist would probably have served the quiet that Lumet is building. Or maybe this is like the one concession he made where he was just willing to let the studio, like, oh, people need to feel, okay, fine, Johnny Mandel can do the score.
Yeah.
But yeah, in his in making movies, he talks about the verdict mostly from a screenwriting challenge and from the Managing Mammoth challenge. But I don't know that he mentioned, it's been so long since I've read it, I can't remember if he talks about the score, but it is one thing that feels unnecessary. It's like the one.
I almost wish there was no score. Like pull like a Michael Haneke and do just no score in the movie, because you don't need it. Like everything else is, the sound design could have done that. Just like the sound of that city or footsteps of like the people in the courthouse and all that kind of stuff really would have done it. So it's interesting. But I was kind of okay. This question for you: if they were to make this movie or a type of this kind of movie again, this now, who could be Newman?
It's funny. All of my brain power has been telling me the only way this gets made now is as an 8-part miniseries. Like, because everything, all IP comes back.
Yeah.
And now it's all about streaming. So I could see now that Disney owns this, it would be a Hulu show and it would probably star, I mean, Cranston's the obvious one.
Right. Well, he's already in an illegal thing.
Yeah,
You're
he's already
or
done it,
whatever.
right? And I don't think I want to see him do this anyway. I think Newman is so specific. I would, maybe Denzel Washington, except that he's already sort of done it a couple of times in movies like Flight, where he's played broken people.
Yes. Yes. And I love Denzel, and like there's moments of Denzel. I mean, Denzel is amazing. There's moments that I'm just like, wow, as an actor. But sometimes he can be a little flashy. Sometimes
Mm.
it's flashy. But Denzel, I think, would be yes. I almost think, and I don't know, this isn't a movie that is not similar. It's kind of similar, David versus Goliath kind of story, underdogs. Not a personal redemption movie, but someone trying to make up for something maybe that they didn't get to in their past.
Mm.
This movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I love Moneyball. I love that movie as well. Not a perfect movie, not like this movie, but has some elements of that. So I feel like, Brad Pitt is the only one that could kind of do.
Interesting.
I mean, he's kind of done it already with Moneyball, but that kind of golden boy, which Newman was as well, kind of what when you're older and bringing that history. And I don't know, I feel like Brad Pitt, does he have the range? Does he have the depth or whatever? But I think maybe.
You could certainly do the broken charming guy thing.
Yeah.
But I want to throw a different curveball in, and I would suggest like either Julianne Moore or Jean Smart.
Yes, Julianne Moore. I love Julianne Moore, but I think this is the typical kind of thing that she would do. But
that's fair.
I'd have to think more. Yeah, I just saw Tar with Cate Blanchett.
Mm.
It's my favorite movie of the year so far, and I think she's just amazing in it. And maybe in 20 years, Cate Blanchett could do this.
Blanchett could do anything really. Tilda Swinton maybe also right now could do it.
And yeah,
because she's 62 or something impossible.
Right.
I'm actively offended at her inability to age.
I know. She looks exactly like she did in Orlando.
I was about to say Orlando just hit its 30th anniversary, and I just revisited that for something else. And it's like, is it lighting? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's living in like northern Scotland or something like that. Maybe the air up there is different. I don't know.
Yeah, someday we're going to find out she just goes out and eats an entire sheep, like she chases and eats a sheep every year to maintain this, and then all the light comes away from it. Before we wander too far off, I did want to ask, though, about Stay the Night, because we were talking about this before we started recording, and I loved it. I think it's a perfect encapsulation of what it's like to be young and kind of rootless and not rootless at the same time. And what you do in that film with Andrea Bang, or what she does for you, is track an evolution in much the same way Newman does as Frank. For Lynette. Yeah. And that was when you said you wanted to do The Verdict, the two things that jumped out at me were the sense of place that Stay the Night has is very, very similar to the Boston of The Verdict, where you've basically locked yourself into a small section of Toronto that I know really well, which is extra great. But the authenticity with which you show the city and the warts and all portrait of all the pieces of it that work together, from the background of from the backstage of an arena to the just waiting for an elevator in a really tall building to the small places that the characters find themselves in. And then also the journey that I don't want to spoil for people, but the type of movie it is, someone starts in one place and ends in another place. Emotionally, the way that you get Bang to do that is very, very precise and very, very small. And when you watch the film a second time, the evolution is right there in front of you, the same way it is in The Verdict.
Yeah, well, I mean, the movie, like on its surface, is like it's about a one-night stand that turns into something more meaningful. And like Andrea plays this sort of HR advisor who wants to like move up, and like she's 27 and wants to move up, and she doesn't get this promotion that she thought she deserved, and so she because she's reserved and standoffish, and so she decides, like, you know what, I'm gonna have a one-night stand tonight. I'm gonna break out of my shell. And the guy she kind of like lands on at the bar is this guy named Carter, and he's a NHL hockey player who's just been sent down. So like that's sort of the meet cute of it, and they spend the night kind of walking around the city and getting to each other. But so it sounds like Before Sunrise, but set in Toronto. But it's not. I always try to, like, it's more. I think it's really, like you said, I wanted those characters to both have a change by the end of that night, and a life kind of change that feels real, which is extremely hard to do when you have a set time frame of like 12 hours that your movie takes place over the course of 12 hours. So, but yeah, Andrea is just amazing. She really, I think, just brought, I don't know, such real authenticity to that role. And it's these micro expressions and thoughts, the wheels turning, that you can see in her performance. And I'm also very proud of the script. It was again a movie that each scene builds on top of the next. There's nowhere to hide. Can't hide any mistakes. There's no montages where they just fall in love. It's earned. I wanted everything to be earned. Even, I don't know, the last shot of the movie, I won't give it away, but we show something that hasn't been seen in any of the first 90 minutes of the movie, which you'd think a movie set in Toronto would show. And I wanted to earn that. That's why I never showed that place, that spot. You want to earn it. Because I never seen a movie about Toronto. You see that thing. Probably people can guess what that is now. But you see it, you're like, oh, I know. You just sort of pointed out, and I didn't want that. I wanted to earn.
Yeah, and it also just feels more like a movie made by somebody who lives here, because we don't think about that thing. Like, it's just there.
Yeah, it's just there.
I used to work in that thing.
Yeah.
When I was in high school.
Yeah, and it's like also that realism I wanted. Like, what is it really like to walk around at night in that spot, and geographically correct as well.
Yeah.
There's been Toronto set movies where like, wait, they're in the beaches now. That is like that's a long Queen Street streetcar ride. That doesn't make any. They wouldn't jog all the way there. I wanted to really make it real, and like you could retrace our characters' steps in the movie and go to all those places, except for Cold Tea, which is closed, but is in a new location, so you could go there.
My thanks to Renuka Jeyapalan, whose lovely first feature, Stay the Night, opens in Toronto and Vancouver this Friday, November 18th. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Renuka's not on Twitter, but you can find her on Instagram at rjeyapalan, RJEYAPALAN, and you can find The Verdict on Blu-ray and DVD from Walt Disney Home Entertainment and streaming on Disney Plus in Canada. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.